The massive space station floated in the darkness like a giant crystal palace. The Galactic Council had built it to be the most beautiful thing in space. Every wall was made of smooth white stone that seemed to glow with its own light. Golden lines ran through the floors like rivers of light. The air smelled of flowers from a dozen different worlds. Council member Zephyr looked out the huge window at the approaching ship. He had 6 arms and skin that changed colors when he felt different emotions. Right now, his skin was showing calm blue patterns. He had been doing this job for 50 years. He had met representatives from over 300 different species. They all came the same way. First, they sent messages, polite messages asking for meetings. Then they came in small, clean ships. The beings who stepped out wore fancy robes or beautiful clothes. They spoke in soft voices. They brought gifts and wanted to talk about trade or peace treaties. Zephyr had the papers ready for the humans. Earth was a new world. They had just discovered how to travel between stars. The Council had sent them the standard welcome package. It explained how First Contact worked. It told them to send their best diplomats. It gave them rules about what to wear and how to behave. The human ship was getting closer. Zephyr could see it clearly now. His skin suddenly changed to confused purple patterns. This was not what he expected. The human ship was huge. It was black and gray with scars all over its surface. Burn marks covered the sides. Parts of it looked like they had been blown off and welded back on. Strange weapons stuck out from every angle. The name on the side said Indomitable in harsh white letters. "This cannot be right," Zephyr muttered. His assistant, a small floating creature named Pip, bobbed nervously beside him. "Maybe they sent the wrong ship," Pip suggested. "Maybe their diplomats are inside." The ship docked with a loud clang that shook the whole station. The docking bay was designed for gentle meetings. This ship had just crashed into it like a hammer hitting glass. The airlock opened with a hiss of steam. One person walked out. She was not wearing robes. She was not carrying gifts. She looked like she had been in a war. The woman was tall and strong. Her left arm was not real. It was made of metal and moved with small mechanical sounds. Scars covered her face and hands. Her hair was cut short and practical. She wore thick black clothing covered in pockets and tools. Heavy boots made loud sounds on the beautiful floor. But it was her eyes that made Zephyr step backward. They were the eyes of someone who had seen terrible things and survived them. They were the eyes of someone who was not afraid of anything. She walked into the greeting hall where 12 council members waited. Each member represented a different species. All of them were chosen because they were good at talking and making peace. They had spent years learning how to solve problems with words instead of violence. The human woman looked at each of them. She did not bow. She did not introduce herself politely. She did not apologize for being late or for her appearance. Instead, she reached into one of her pockets and pulled out a small device. She dropped it on the crystal table with a loud thunk. The beautiful table was now scratched. "I am Commander Sarah Martinez," she said. Her voice was rough and direct. "My friends call me Havoc. Earth got your message about the problem you are having. The one where some bad aliens are eating planets and your talking is not working." Council member Thrain, who looked like a tall blue tree with golden leaves, spoke first. "Welcome, honored representative. We were expecting perhaps a delegation of peaceful ambassadors. We have prepared cultural exchange ceremonies and—" "No time for that," Martinez interrupted. "I read your files on the way here. The Vorthak have destroyed 18 worlds in the past 2 years. They ate 3 billion people last month. Your cultural exchange ceremonies are not going to bring them back." The council members looked at each other nervously. This was not how First Contact was supposed to happen. Council member Senna, a graceful being that looked like living water in a beautiful shape, tried to speak more diplomatically. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. We requested Earth send representatives to discuss peaceful solutions to the Vorthak situation. We believe that all conflicts can be resolved through proper dialogue and—" Martinez laughed. It was not a happy sound. "Peaceful solutions? Lady, these things do not want to talk. They want to eat everything that moves. They have been doing it for 40 years. How much dialogue do you need?" She picked up the device she had dropped on the table. It projected images into the air above them. The images showed destroyed worlds, cities that had been melted down to nothing, forests that had been turned into gray slime, oceans that had become empty holes in the ground. "This is what happens when you try to negotiate with monsters," Martinez said. "The Vorthak do not want your treaties. They do not want your trade agreements. They want to turn your people into soup and your planets into fuel for their ships. Council member Krex, who had scales and breathed fire when excited, puffed small flames nervously. But surely there must be some way to reach an understanding. All species are capable of reason if approached correctly. Are they? Martinez pulled up another image. It showed a Vorthak creature. It looked like a giant insect mixed with a machine. Instead of eyes, it had glowing red sensors. Instead of hands, it had metal claws dripping with acid. This thing used to be someone like you. The Vorthak caught him and changed him. They took away his mind and made him into a weapon. Does that look like something you can reason with? The room fell silent. The council members had seen these images before, but they had always believed that there had to be another way. Violence was not the answer. It never was. Martinez saw their faces and her expression softened slightly. Look, I understand what you are trying to do. Peace is good. Talking is good. I have fought in enough wars to know that fighting should always be the last choice. She gestured to her mechanical arm. I did not lose this because I wanted to fight. I lost it because someone had to stand between monsters and innocent people. She leaned forward on the table. But some problems cannot be solved with words. Some monsters cannot be reasoned with. The Vorthak are not evil because they choose to be evil. They are evil because that is what they are. They cannot stop being what they are any more than you can stop breathing. Council member Zephyr finally found his voice. His skin was now showing confused red and yellow patterns. What are you suggesting, Commander Martinez? Martinez smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who knew how to solve impossible problems in ways that no one else would think of. I am suggesting that you stop trying to solve this problem like diplomats, she said. You called Earth because you needed help. Earth did not send you diplomats. Earth sent you something much more dangerous. She stood up and looked at each council member again. Earth sent you a human who specializes in doing things that everyone says cannot be done. I have spent 20 years turning impossible situations into victories. I have saved people who could not be saved. I have won battles that could not be won. Martinez picked up her device and put it back in her pocket. The Vorthak think they are unstoppable because no one has ever really tried to stop them. Everyone just tries to run away or hide or negotiate. But humans do not work that way. She turned to walk back toward her ship. Give me 3 days to study your files. Then I will tell you exactly how we are going to kill every last one of these things and save everyone they have not eaten yet. The council members sat in stunned silence as her heavy boots echoed down the hallway. Earth had not sent them diplomats. Earth had sent them something far more terrifying. Earth had sent them hope. Commander Martinez spent the first day reading everything the council had about the Vorthak. She sat in a small room they had given her, surrounded by floating screens showing data, reports, and battle recordings. Her mechanical fingers tapped against the desk as she worked. The more she read, the angrier she became. The Galactic Council had been fighting the Vorthak for 43 years. In that time, they had lost 47 worlds and over 15 billion people. They had tried everything they could think of. They had sent armies. They had built bigger weapons. They had even tried to make peace treaties. Nothing worked. The Vorthak were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They did not come from one planet. They did not have cities or governments. They lived inside massive ships that were alive. These bioships could grow and change and heal themselves. They could turn normal matter into food. They could take prisoners and change them into new Vorthak soldiers. But the worst part was how they thought. The Vorthak did not have individual minds. They shared one giant mind that connected all of them. When one Vorthak learned something, they all learned it instantly. When the Council developed a new weapon, the Vorthak would know how to defend against it within hours. When military commanders made battle plans, the Vorthak would know what they were thinking before the battle even started. Every species that had fought them had lost. The lucky ones had time to evacuate their planets. The unlucky ones were turned into more Vorthak. Martinez closed the last file and leaned back in her chair. She understood now why the Council had given up trying to fight. How do you defeat an enemy that learns from everything you do? How do you surprise something that shares the memories of every soldier you have ever faced? But Martinez had spent her whole life solving impossible problems. She had learned to think differently than other people. On the second day, she called for a meeting with the Council's military advisors. The meeting room was full of generals and admirals from dozens of different species. They all looked tired. They all looked defeated. They had been fighting an unwinnable war for so long that they had forgotten what victory felt like. "Show me your best battle plan," Martinez said without any greeting. Admiral Kronak, a massive creature with 4 arms and thick armor plates, activated a holographic display. "This is Operation Final Stand. We would gather every ship we have left and attack their main fleet. We estimate we could destroy maybe 30% of their forces before they adapt to our weapons and destroy us." Martinez studied the plan. It was detailed and careful. It used every trick these people had learned over 4 decades of war. It was also completely predictable. "This will not work," she said. "We know," Admiral Kronak replied sadly, "but it is the best we can do. We cannot think of anything else." General Vex, who looked like a metal spider with glowing eyes, spoke up. "Perhaps you have suggestions, human? Your species has great confidence, but you have never faced the Vorthak. You do not understand what we are dealing with." Martinez stood up and walked to the holographic display. She pointed at the image of a Vorthak bioship. "I understand perfectly. You have been trying to fight them like they are a normal enemy. You use standard tactics. You follow military rules. You try to be honorable and fair." She turned to face the room full of defeated military leaders. "The Vorthak do not care about honor. They do not follow rules. They do not fight fair. So why are you trying to?" The room was quiet. These were professional soldiers who had trained their whole lives to follow proper military procedures. "What are you suggesting?" Admiral Kronak asked. Martinez smiled her dangerous smile. "I am suggesting we stop trying to outfight them and start trying to outthink them. The Vorthak have one big advantage. Their shared mind lets them learn from every battle, but that is also their biggest weakness." She manipulated the holographic display, changing the images to show what she was thinking. "They are used to fighting armies. Big fleets with thousands of ships following predictable attack patterns. They have seen every military tactic in your books. They know how to counter everything you know how to do." The display now showed something different. Instead of a massive fleet, it showed one small ship. "But they have never fought humans. They have never faced someone who grew up in a species that spent most of its history fighting itself. Humans do not just know military tactics. We know dirty tricks. We know how to cheat. We know how to turn an enemy's strength against them." General Vex's eyes glowed brighter. "You want to attack their main fleet with one ship? That is not strategy. That is suicide." "No," Martinez said. "I want to attack their main fleet with one ship that they will not see coming. A ship that does not try to destroy them from the outside." She changed the display again. Now it showed the inside of a Vorthak bioship. The walls were alive and pulsing. Strange growths covered every surface. And in the center was a massive brain that glowed with electrical activity. The Vorthak share one mind. That mind has to be stored somewhere. Every bioship has a piece of it, but their command ship has the biggest piece. The central brain that controls everything. Admiral Kronak leaned forward. "The command ship is the most heavily defended target in their fleet. It is surrounded by hundreds of smaller ships. Its hull can repair itself faster than we can damage it. Even if we could get close, we could never break through." "We do not break through," Martinez said. "We let them capture us." The room exploded with protests. Every military leader started talking at once, explaining why that was the worst possible idea. Martinez waited for them to finish. "The Vorthak do not just destroy ships," she continued when they were quiet. "They absorb them. They take the metal and technology and make it part of their bioships. They also take prisoners and study them to learn how to fight their species better." She pointed to herself. "What happens when they try to study a human? What happens when they connect a human mind to their shared consciousness?" General Vex was the first to understand. "You want to infect their shared mind with human thoughts." "Exactly. The Vorthak have never encountered a species like ours. They do not know about human stubbornness. They do not know about human creativity. They do not know about our ability to think as individuals even when we are part of a group." Martinez changed the display one more time. Now it showed what looked like a virus spreading through a network. "Humans are immune to hive minds because we never evolved to have one. Our brains are designed to think independently. When they try to connect me to their consciousness, I will not become one of them. Instead, I will teach their consciousness how to think like a human." The room was silent again, but this time it was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of people trying to understand something completely new. Admiral Kronak spoke slowly. "You believe you can break their shared mind, turn them against each other?" "I believe I can teach them something they have never learned," Martinez said. I can teach them how to disagree with each other, how to want different things, how to choose their own path instead of following orders. She looked at each of the military leaders. The Vorthak are not evil because they choose to be evil. They are evil because they cannot choose anything else. Their shared mind makes all the decisions for them. But what happens if individual Vorthak start making their own decisions? General Vex's metal body was humming with electrical activity. They would fight each other instead of fighting us. Maybe. Or maybe some of them would choose to stop fighting entirely. Maybe some of them would want to help the people they have hurt. The point is, they would have a choice. Martinez turned off the holographic display. I need 3 volunteers. People who are not afraid of dying and who are very good at thinking fast when everything goes wrong. I also need a ship that looks valuable enough for the Vorthak to want to capture instead of destroy. Admiral Kronak stood up. His forearms were shaking slightly. This plan is insane. You are asking us to let you be captured by the most dangerous enemy we have ever faced. You are betting everything on an idea that might not work. Martinez nodded. Yes, that is exactly what I am asking. She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. You have been fighting this war the same way for 43 years. You have lost 47 worlds and 15 billion people. Your best plan involves sacrificing everything you have left for a 30% chance of hurting them. She opened the door. My plan gives us a chance to actually win. Not just hurt them. Not just slow them down. Actually end this war and save everyone who is still alive. She walked out, leaving behind a room full of military leaders who had to choose between certain defeat and impossible hope. For the first time in decades, some of them were starting to remember what hope felt like. Finding volunteers was easier than Martinez had expected. Word of her plan had spread through the station quickly. Within hours, she had over 200 people asking to join her mission. They came from dozens of different species, all of them tired of running from the Vorthak. But Martinez did not want soldiers who were brave. She wanted people who were smart in unusual ways. Her first choice was Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a human xenobiologist who had been studying Vorthak technology for 5 years. Dr. Tanaka was small and quiet, with gentle hands and thick glasses. She did not look like someone who belonged on a military mission, but she had survived 3 days inside a Vorthak bioship. 2 years ago, her research station had been attacked. The Vorthak had captured her and brought her inside their ship to study her. They wanted to learn how human biology worked. Dr. Tanaka had let them examine her while secretly studying them right back. She had learned to control her heartbeat and brain patterns to confuse their scanners. She had figured out how to mimic their biosignatures well enough to move through their ship without being detected. When a rescue team finally found her, she had collected more information about Vorthak biology than anyone else in the galaxy. I can get us past their internal defenses, Dr. Tanaka told Martinez during their interview. I know how their biological systems work. I know what they look for when they scan for threats. Her second choice was Sergeant Tom O'Sullivan, a demolitions expert from Earth's military. Sergeant O'Sullivan was a big man with red hair and hands that were always moving. He could not sit still for more than a few minutes. He was constantly taking things apart to see how they worked, then putting them back together in new ways. He had a special talent for making explosives out of things that were not supposed to be explosive. Give me a kitchen and 30 minutes, and I can make a bomb that will blow a hole through a battleship, he told Martinez with a grin. Give me access to Vorthak biotechnology, and I can probably make something that will surprise even them. The third volunteer was Lieutenant Zara al-Rashid, a pilot from Earth who had never lost a ship. She had been flying for 12 years. First in Earth's atmosphere and then between the stars. Other pilots said she could make a ship do things that physics said were impossible. I do not believe in impossible, she told Martinez. I believe in finding the solution that nobody else thought of. When everyone says something cannot be done, that just means they are not being creative enough. Lieutenant al-Rashid was also the only person who had ever escaped from a Vorthak bioship. Her transport had been captured 6 months ago. Instead of waiting for rescue, she had stolen a Vorthak fighter and flown it back to friendly space. The fighter was now being studied by Council scientists who still could not figure out how she had made it work. With her team chosen, Martinez needed to prepare for the mission. The hardest part was going to be the approach. The Vorthak had to believe that their ship was worth capturing instead of destroying. The Council gave them a modified science vessel called the Curiosity. It was not a warship, but it was equipped with some of the most advanced research equipment in the galaxy. To the Vorthak, it would look like a treasure, ship full of new technology to absorb. But the real treasure was hidden. Inside the ship's computers, Dr. Tanaka had created something she called a cognitive virus. It was not a computer program. It was a pattern of thoughts designed to spread through the Vorthak hive mind like a disease. The virus carried human concepts that the Vorthak had never encountered: individual choice, personal responsibility, and the right to disagree. The Vorthak mind is like a perfectly organized library, Dr. Tanaka explained as she showed Martinez how the virus worked. Every thought is in its proper place. Every memory is cataloged and shared. But human thoughts are messy. We have contradictions and doubts and questions that do not have clear answers. She activated a display that showed how the virus would spread. When the Vorthak try to absorb human memories, they will also absorb human ways of thinking. The virus will teach them to question their orders. It will show them that they can choose to be different than what they were made to be. Sergeant O'Sullivan had been working on a different kind of surprise. He had filled the ship's cargo holds with materials that looked like valuable research supplies. In reality, they were components for bombs that would activate at specific biosignatures. The beautiful thing about fighting living ships, he explained while putting together what looked like a medical scanner, is that they have nervous systems. Hurt the right nerve cluster, and you can cause massive paralysis. Or better yet, you can cause them to lose control of their own biological functions. His explosives were designed to activate only after the ship had been partially absorbed by a Vorthak bioship. They would not destroy the enemy vessel. Instead, they would damage its ability to think clearly and coordinate with other ships. Lieutenant Al-Rashid had studied every piece of information the Council had about Vorthak bioships. She had learned how they moved, how they thought, and most importantly, how they made decisions about what to capture and what to destroy. They want ships that are trying to escape, she told the team during their final briefing. Running away makes us look valuable and helpless. But we cannot run too fast, or they will think we are a military vessel pretending to be a civilian ship. She had programmed a flight pattern that would make the Curiosity look like a research vessel that had accidentally wandered into Vorthak space. The ship would appear to have engine problems that prevented it from jumping to faster-than-light travel. It would send distress signals asking for help. It would do everything possible to look like an easy target. The night before the mission, Martinez could not sleep. She walked through the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars and thinking about everything that could go wrong. Dr. Tanaka found her there an hour before dawn. Having second thoughts? The scientist asked, joining Martinez at the window. Always, Martinez replied. That is what keeps me alive. The moment you stop worrying about what could go wrong is the moment something goes wrong that you did not expect. They stood together in comfortable silence for a while, watching ships move between the stars in the distance. Can I ask you something? Dr. Tanaka said eventually. Sure. Why did Earth really send you? I read your file. You have never been a diplomat. You have never even been to an alien world before this one. Why did they choose you for first contact? Martinez thought about the question for a long time before answering. Because this is not really first contact. This is a rescue mission. The Galactic Council called for help, and Earth sent the kind of help they needed, not the kind they asked for. She turned away from the window. Earth has been watching the galaxy for 50 years. We have seen what the Vorthak do to peaceful species. We know that sometimes the only way to save innocent people is to be willing to do terrible things to monsters. Dr. Tanaka nodded slowly. And you are willing to do terrible things? Martinez looked at her mechanical arm. I have already done terrible things. I have killed people who needed to die so that people who deserved to live could keep living. I have made choices that no one should have to make. That is why Earth sent me instead of a diplomat. She started walking back toward their ship. Diplomats are for making peace with people who want peace. I am for dealing with people who want war. Dr. Tanaka followed her. What if the plan does not work? What if we cannot change the Vorthak? What if they are too alien to understand human concepts? Martinez stopped and looked back at her. Then we will die trying, but at least we will die doing something that has never been tried before. The Council has been fighting the same war the same way for 43 years. They have never tried to change their enemy. They have only tried to destroy them. She continued walking. Sometimes the only way to win a war is to turn your enemies into something that does not want to fight anymore. In a few hours, they would find out if humans could teach monsters how to stop being monsters, or if monsters would teach humans how to become something worse. The Curiosity dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Vorthak space. Lieutenant Al-Rashid had positioned them perfectly, close enough to look like they had made a navigation error, far enough away to give the Vorthak time to decide whether to capture or destroy them. Through the view screen, they could see the Vorthak fleet in the distance. Dozens of bioships moved through space like living islands. The smallest ones were the size of cities. The largest ones were big enough to swallow moons. Their surfaces pulsed with veins of light that carried information and energy throughout their living hulls. And in the center of the fleet was the command ship. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Where other Vorthak ships looked like mutated animals or giant insects, the command ship looked like a brain floating in space. Its surface was covered in neural pathways that glowed with constant electrical activity. Smaller ships moved around it like thoughts moving through a mind. "There it is," Martinez said quietly, "the thing that controls everything they do." Dr. Tanaka was monitoring their bioscanners. "I am reading massive psychic activity from the command ship. The neural patterns are incredibly complex. This is not just a ship, it is actually thinking." Sergeant O'Sullivan was making final preparations to his hidden explosives. "Once we are inside that thing, how long do we have before they figure out what we are really doing?" "Not long," Martinez admitted. "Maybe minutes. Maybe less. The moment they start scanning our brains, they will know we are not what we appear to be." Lieutenant Al-Rashid activated the distress beacon and began broadcasting their cover story. "This is the research vessel Curiosity. We have suffered engine failure and are unable to achieve faster-than-light travel. Requesting immediate assistance from any nearby vessels." The message was designed to sound desperate but not suspicious. They were pretending to be scientists who had been studying ancient artifacts in empty space when their ship broke down. The cargo holds were full of fake archaeological samples that would look valuable to the Vorthak. It did not take long for a response. 3 Vorthak scout ships detached themselves from the main fleet and began moving toward the Curiosity. They moved in a way that was both graceful and terrifying, like predators that had spotted easy prey. "Here we go," Al-Rashid said. She began implementing the engine problems they had programmed. The ship's lights flickered. The engines made distressed sounds. To any observer, it would look like they were about to lose life support. The first Vorthak ship reached them within minutes. It was smaller than the others, designed for speed and reconnaissance. Tentacles emerged from its hull and wrapped around the Curiosity like a giant hand grasping a toy. Martinez felt a shiver run down her spine as alien thoughts touched the edge of her mind. The Vorthak were beginning their initial scan, looking for threats and valuable resources. Dr. Tanaka had prepared them for this moment. She had taught them how to control their thoughts, how to project the mental patterns of frightened civilians instead of trained military personnel. It was like acting, but with their minds instead of their voices. The scanning intensified. Martinez could feel alien intelligence probing her memories, looking for useful information. She let it see what it expected to see: a human military officer who had been assigned to protect civilian scientists. Someone brave but not particularly clever. Someone who would fight but could not think of anything creative. The Vorthak bought the deception. The scout ship released them and sent a signal to the main fleet. Within an hour, one of the larger bioships had arrived to collect them. This ship was the size of a small city. Its hull was covered in what looked like organic docking bays. The Curiosity was pulled inside one of these bays, and immediately the walls began to close around them. "We are being absorbed," Dr. Tanaka reported. "The bioship is integrating our vessel into its own structure." Through the view screen, they could see the process happening. Living tissue was growing over their hull. Neural pathways were connecting to their ship's computer systems. The Vorthak were making the Curiosity part of themselves. This was the most dangerous part of the plan. If the Vorthak discovered Dr. Tanaka's cognitive virus during the integration process, they would all be killed immediately. But the virus was hidden too well. It was disguised as navigation data and buried in their computer's memory banks. To the Vorthak, it looked like harmless star charts and technical manuals. The integration process took 3 hours. When it was complete, they were no longer inside a human ship. They were inside a living alien organism that could read their thoughts and control their actions. The first Vorthak soldiers came for them shortly after. They had once been people. Martinez could see traces of different species in their faces and bodies, but the Vorthak had changed them into something else. Their eyes glowed with the same red light as the ship's neural pathways. Their movements were perfectly coordinated like parts of a single machine. The soldiers did not speak. They did not need to. They shared the same mind. They escorted Martinez and her team through corridors that pulsed with life. The walls were warm and wet. Strange growths provided light. The air smelled of things that had been alive but were alive in a different way now. They were brought to what the Vorthak probably thought of as a laboratory. It was a large chamber filled with devices that could analyze and modify living tissue. This was where they turned prisoners into new Vorthak soldiers. Dr. Tanaka was taken first. She lay down on the examination table without resistance. The Vorthak needed to believe that she was a frightened scientist who would cooperate to save her life. Tentacles emerged from the table and began connecting to her nervous system. Martinez watched through a window as the process began. She could see Dr. Tanaka's vital signs on the monitors. Her heart rate was elevated, but her brain patterns showed the carefully controlled patterns they had practiced. The cognitive virus was designed to activate during this moment. When the Vorthak connected Dr. Tanaka's mind to their collective consciousness, they would also connect themselves to the virus. For several minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Dr. Tanaka lay still while alien machines studied her biology. The Vorthak scientists, if they could still be called scientists, gathered information about human physiology and psychology. Then something changed. One of the Vorthak scientists stopped moving. It stood perfectly still for almost a minute as if it was thinking about something. Then it looked around the laboratory. With what might have been confusion, another scientist paused in its work. Then another. The virus was spreading. For the first time in their existence, individual Vorthak were having thoughts that were not shared by the collective mind. They were experiencing doubt. They were questioning whether what they were doing was right. One of the scientists disconnected Dr. Tanaka from the examination table and stepped back, looking at its own hands as if seeing them for the first time. An alarm began to sound throughout the ship. The collective mind had detected the virus, but it was too late. The infection had already spread to dozens of individual Vorthak, and each infected individual was spreading it to others through their neural connections. Martinez and her team were roughly grabbed by soldiers and dragged toward the ship's central brain chamber. The Vorthak had realized that their prisoners were not what they appeared to be, but Sergeant O'Sullivan had been waiting for this moment. As they were pulled through the ship's corridors, he activated the first stage of his explosives. Hidden devices throughout the Curiosity began releasing chemical compounds into the bioship's atmosphere. The compounds were designed to look like harmless byproducts of human technology, but they were actually neurotoxins that would affect the ship's biological systems. The effects were immediate. The corridor walls began to spasm. The neural pathways that provided light flickered and dimmed. The bioship was losing coordination between its different sections. They reached the central brain chamber just as the ship's nervous system began to fail. The chamber was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above them. In the center was the ship's brain, a mass of neural tissue the size of a building covered in electrical patterns that showed its thoughts. Dozens of Vorthak soldiers surrounded them, but many of them were moving strangely. The virus had spread throughout the ship, and individual soldiers were beginning to act independently instead of following the collective mind's orders. Some of them lowered their weapons. Others looked around in confusion, as if they had just woken up from a long dream. A few began to back away from Martinez and her team, no longer sure why they had been ordered to capture these strangers. The collective mind was fighting back. Through the ship's communication system, it sent commands to destroy the intruders immediately. But many of the soldiers were no longer listening to commands. They were thinking for themselves for the first time in their lives. Martinez could feel the alien consciousness trying to invade her mind, trying to understand what was happening to its perfect order. She let it in, but she was ready for it. When the collective mind touched her thoughts, it found something it had never encountered before: a human who refused to be controlled. The virus in Martinez's mind was not like the one Dr. Tanaka had created. This was something deeper. This was the fundamental human refusal to surrender individual will to any authority, no matter how powerful. The collective mind recoiled in shock and confusion. It had absorbed thousands of species over the centuries, but none of them had ever resisted absorption so completely. Martinez smiled and pushed back with her own thoughts, flooding the collective consciousness with human concepts it could not understand or control. The ship's brain began to convulse as conflicting thoughts spread through its neural pathways. Individual Vorthak throughout the ship were suddenly experiencing emotions they had never felt before: curiosity, compassion, and the desire to make their own choices. The collective mind was breaking apart, and in the distance Martinez could see other bioships in the fleet, beginning to show signs of the same chaos. The virus was spreading from ship to ship through their shared consciousness. The war was about to change in ways that no one had ever imagined. The chaos spread through the Vorthak fleet like fire through dry grass. Ship after ship began to show signs of the cognitive virus as individual Vorthak started thinking for themselves instead of following the collective mind's orders. Martinez watched through the bioship's neural displays as the fleet began to tear itself apart. Ships that had moved in perfect coordination for decades suddenly started attacking each other. Some Vorthak had decided that their mission of consuming worlds was wrong. Others had decided that their fellow Vorthak were traitors who needed to be destroyed, but the most important change was happening right in front of her. The Vorthak soldiers in the brain chamber were no longer acting like soldiers. Some of them had dropped their weapons entirely. Others were staring at their hands as if seeing them for the first time. A few were trying to communicate with each other using individual voices instead of shared thoughts. One of them approached Martinez slowly. It had once been a member of a species that looked like tall, graceful birds. The Vorthak had added mechanical parts to its body and changed its beautiful feathers into dark, armored scales. But now, for the first time in years, its eyes showed individual intelligence. What have you done to us?" it asked in a voice that shook with confusion and fear. Martinez looked into those eyes and saw something that had never existed in a Vorthak before. A person who was asking questions instead of following orders. "We gave you a choice," she said gently. "For the first time in your existence, you can decide what you want to do instead of being told what to do." The former soldier looked around the chamber at its fellow Vorthak. Some of them were helping prisoners who had been scheduled for conversion. Others were trying to understand what they had become and what they had done to countless worlds. "We have destroyed so many," it whispered. "We have taken so many lives. We thought we were serving a greater purpose, but we were just consuming everything." Dr. Tanaka had freed herself from her restraints and was studying the bioship's neural networks. "The collective mind is fragmenting," she reported to Martinez. "Individual Vorthak throughout the fleet are developing independent consciousness. But the process is not complete. Some of them are fighting the change." She was right. Not every Vorthak was accepting their new individual consciousness. Some were trying to reconnect to the collective mind, to return to the simple certainty of following orders without question. The fleet was dividing into factions, with some ships supporting the change and others trying to destroy the infected vessels. Sergeant O'Sullivan had found the ship's weapon systems and was working to disable them. "The good news is that this ship will not be shooting at anyone anytime soon," he called out. "The bad news is that there are about 50 other ships out there that are still fully functional and very angry." Lieutenant Al-Rashid was at a navigation console, studying the tactical situation. "The fleet is breaking apart into 3 groups. About 30% of the ships seem to have accepted the virus and are withdrawing from combat. Another 30% are trying to fight off the infection and restore the collective mind. The remaining 40% are attacking everyone, including each other." Martinez realized that their mission was only half complete. They had succeeded in breaking the Vorthak collective consciousness, but now they had to deal with the consequences. A chaotic fleet of living warships fighting each other was almost as dangerous as an organized fleet consuming worlds. "We need to get to the command ship," she decided. "The main brain that coordinates the entire fleet. If we can help it understand what is happening, maybe we can prevent a complete collapse into civil war." The bird-like Vorthak, who had first spoken to her, overheard the conversation. "I can help you reach the command ship," it offered. "My name was Kithara before I was changed. I remember being a navigation officer. I can pilot this vessel." Other individual Vorthak began to volunteer their help. A former engineer offered to repair the ship's damaged systems. A former communications officer offered to try to contact the command ship and explain what was happening. Working together, They managed to get their bioship moving toward the command vessel. The journey through the chaotic fleet was terrifying. Ships were firing at random targets. Biofighters swarmed through space without coordination. Some vessels were actually tearing themselves apart as their internal populations fought over whether to maintain the collective mind or embrace individual consciousness. When they reached the command ship, they found it in a state of complete neural overload. The massive brain that controlled the entire fleet was experiencing thoughts and emotions it had never been designed to handle. Individual nodes throughout its structure were developing independent consciousness, while other sections were trying to maintain central control. The ship was literally thinking itself to death. Martinez and her team, accompanied by their new Vorthak allies, made their way to the command ship's central consciousness chamber. It was even larger than the brain chamber on their previous ship, a cathedral-sized space filled with neural tissue that pulsed with chaotic electrical patterns. At the center of the chamber was something that Martinez had not expected. A single figure connected to the central brain by thousands of neural cables. It had once been a person, but the Vorthak had transformed it into something that was part biological and part machine. This was the central intelligence that had coordinated the Vorthak's expansion across the galaxy. And it was suffering. The consciousness that had once controlled billions of minds was now experiencing the thoughts and emotions of every individual Vorthak who had been infected with the virus. It was feeling guilt for the first time, understanding the pain it had caused, recognizing the horror of what it had become. "Please," it said in a voice that echoed through the chamber, "make it stop. I can feel all of them, all the people we consumed, all the worlds we destroyed. I never knew. I never understood what we were doing." Martinez approached the central figure carefully. This was the being that had ordered the destruction of 47 worlds. It had been responsible for the deaths of billions of innocent people. But now, for the first time, it was capable of understanding the consequences of its actions. "I cannot make it stop," Martinez said, "but I can help you learn to live with it. This is what consciousness means. Understanding the difference between right and wrong and choosing to do better." Dr. Tanaka was studying the neural patterns throughout the chamber. The central consciousness is trying to process too much information at once. It is experiencing the memories and emotions of every individual Vorthak simultaneously. We need to help it learn to separate individual thoughts from collective knowledge. Working together, Martinez's team and their Vorthak allies began to modify the chamber's neural networks. They created barriers between different sections of the central brain, allowing it to experience individual consciousness without being overwhelmed by the thoughts of every Vorthak in the fleet. The process took hours. During that time, the fighting in the fleet gradually began to calm down as more Vorthak accepted their individual consciousness, and others learned to control their reactions to the change. When they were finished, the central consciousness opened its eyes and looked at Martinez with an expression that was both grateful and deeply sad. "We have done terrible things," it said. "We have destroyed civilizations. We have turned countless beings into extensions of our will. How can we possibly make amends for what we have done?" Martinez thought about the question for a long time before answering. "You start by choosing to do better. You help the people you can help. You rebuild what you can rebuild. You use your knowledge and abilities to create instead of destroy." The central consciousness nodded slowly. "Many of our ships contain prisoners who have not yet been converted. We will free them and return them to their worlds. We will share our technology to help repair the damage we have caused. We will—" It paused, struggling with the concept. "We will ask for forgiveness, knowing that we may not deserve it." Over the following days, the transformation of the Vorthak fleet became complete. The ships that had chosen to embrace individual consciousness began working to undo the damage they had caused. They rescued prisoners, shared medical technology to heal the wounded, and provided resources to help rebuild destroyed worlds. Some Vorthak chose to remain together in small groups, working as crews on their bioships. Others chose to leave the fleet entirely, seeking to integrate with the species they had once tried to consume. A few even chose to sacrifice themselves to power the massive reconstruction efforts needed to repair decades of destruction. The ships that had rejected individual consciousness became smaller and smaller minorities, as more Vorthak experienced the freedom of making their own choices. Eventually, even the most resistant vessels accepted the change rather than continue fighting their former fleet mates. Martinez and her team returned to the Galactic Council's station to find a galaxy that had been completely transformed. The threat that had terrorized civilized space for 43 years was gone. In its place was a collection of individual beings who were learning how to think and choose and live as free people. The council members were waiting for them in the same chamber where Martinez had first presented her plan. But now, instead of defeat and despair, their faces showed something that had been absent for decades: hope for the future. "Commander Martinez," Council Member Zephyr said, his skin showing patterns of deep gratitude, "you have given us something we thought we had lost forever. You have given us peace." Martinez looked out the station's windows at the stars. In the distance, she could see Vorthak bioships working alongside council vessels to repair a damaged space station. Former enemies were becoming allies, working together to heal the wounds of war. "We did not give you peace," she said. "We gave them choice. Peace is what they chose to do with it." She turned back to the council members. "Humans have learned something important over our history. The best way to defeat an enemy is not to destroy them. It is to help them become someone who no longer wants to be your enemy." Martinez and her team prepared to return to Earth, but they left behind something that would change the galaxy forever. The knowledge that even the most terrible enemies could learn to be better, if someone was brave enough to show them how. The war was over, but more importantly, a new kind of peace had begun. One built not on the defeat of evil, but on its transformation into something good. Humanity had given the galaxy its greatest gift, the understanding that everyone, no matter how far they had fallen, deserved a chance to choose redemption.